global economy and the very boisterous future of the global South, where all the minerals are, where all the resources are, where all the workers are, where all the consumers are, where all the where the birth rates are continue to be robust, you would understand that we need to decenter the global economy from America. America needs to be removed. As I said before, the center of gravity has to move. America can't keep up. America hasn't been competitive in the world for a long time, and they've made the decision that we have to amputate America basically from the global economy and from global politics. It needs to be removed, and that's exactly what's happening. If you understand that that is what's going on, then none of this will be confusing to you. What Trump is doing, that you're proposing this idea that tariffs are going to bring back manufacturing jobs, you will understand how ridiculous that is, and you will understand that that isn't someone being ridiculous.
Okay, I need for you to elaborate. Why is that ridiculous to have manufacturing back in the United States? I think this is going in over a lot of people's brain.
Okay, well, I mean,
It's not obvious to you.
okay, well, I mean, the first thing is everyone should know by now that tariffs are not paid by the country that's being tariffed. Tariffs are being paid by the importers, domestic businesses, domestic companies, domestic importers, Americans. So it's a tax. You're putting a tax on Americans for importing things.
Okay.
Roughly 50% of American imports, are internal to American companies.
Okay.
So it's like, for example, Apple importing from China something within Apple.
Right.
You know, okay. Obviously, all that does is drive up the prices of goods because you don't have an alternative. It would be different if you actually had a manufacturing base in America, but you don't have manufacturing in America
Why
anymore.
don't you have a manufacturing?
Because you offshored it all during globalization.
Right. So can we bring that manufacturing back into America? Is that
Okay. First of all, that's a very long process
okay?
because no one's trained in that
No
anymore.
one's skilled.
You don't have the skills, and you need a great deal of investment to build those factories, to build the facilities in the first place. And those companies have to have the incentive to do that. The theory is that by punishing them for manufacturing overseas but via tariffs, that will incentivize them to bring back to America. But that's not how companies think. Because if you brought the money, just say Apple. If Apple wanted to stop manufacturing in China and bring all of those jobs to America, you have to deal with the reason why they're in China in the first place, which is the affordability. So either you're going to now have factory workers in America at Chinese wages to make it worthwhile, or an iPhone is going to cost $10,000.
So let's repeat that again. Unless you're willing to have American workers pay Chinese wages
and conditions.
You're
going to be 7 days a week.
Right. I don't know, 9-10 hours a day work.
Yeah.
Maybe even more.
Yeah.
You just have that few hours of sleep and then you get back to work again. And you can still have your iPhones at the kind of prices that you're seeing today. If not expected to.
It's not going to. This is not going to happen.
It's not sustainable.
Obviously, this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
And this is what the other side is saying. You know, the people who are critical of the tariffs, they're saying that that's not going to work. But what I'm saying is, no, everyone knows that already. Because that's not the intention of the tariffs. The intention of the tariffs is to completely isolate America from the global economy.
Yeah.
And to force all of the tariffed countries, especially the BRICS ones, especially China, to focus on, intensify, and expand South-South trade.
Okay.
We want all of the business to be there now.
Outrider Amber.
We don't need the business to be here anymore. Because, I mean, obviously the result of the tariffs is going to be higher prices for goods, Now, I was saying in the chat
Wow, these
that
will come in
most
handy.
likely, and I'd be very surprised if you don't see this. Most likely, you will see, and this also there's an evidence for this is also the stock
I'm
market
looking
drop
forward to this.
that happened when he announced the tariffs. And it also sort of also is evidenced by the drop in the oil price as well,
To my hammer.
which is that these companies, the biggest companies,
Be gone.
the monopolistic companies, the largest corporations like an Apple or Walmart, who rely heavily on imports from China, they will want to get some relief from the federal government. They will want to get subsidies. They'll want to get exemptions. They'll want to get bailout, an aid package, low interest loans, tax breaks, and so forth. So to soften the blow of the sanction, or to soften the blow of the tariffs. In other words, they won't pay the tariffs. The taxpayers will pay the tariffs on their behalf, which just means the taxpayers will be paying the tariffs, and the company will still charge more on the rationale of that there are tariffs. So the taxpayers in America are now going to be paying twice for the tariffs. You'll pay for the tariffs with your taxes. This hasn't been announced, but I'd be very surprised if it doesn't happen. That there's going to be for the largest players, not for the smaller ones, not for the smaller companies. Another part of this move is to shake all of the smaller players out of the market.
Small businesses.
Small businesses will get bought up. More and more small businesses will get bought up, and this is just a continuation of the COVID lockdown program to destroy as many small businesses as possible and increase the monopolization by the largest players. This is very likely to happen with the tariffs, in my opinion, that they'll probably give these large companies some kind of an out with regards to paying for the tariffs. Not that the tariffs won't be paid, but that you and I will pay them, meaning taxpayers, not you. But it'll come. But I have to pay taxes, so it'll come out of our taxes to pay for the tariffs for a Walmart and an Apple and so forth. And then also they will continue to charge more for their products on the basis of there being tariffs. So all of that's going to undermine the livelihood and the affordability of life in America for American citizens. All of this has to do with undermining the American economy, with the owners and controllers of global financialized capital turning away from America and wanting to turn America away from the world. This is the point of the tariffs. There's not another point. It's not at all about bringing manufacturing jobs back. Because even you have choices, like Apple, like as I said, first of all, you don't have alternatives to the products that you're buying from China. You don't have those, and it will take you years, if ever, to be able to produce for yourself what you're getting from China. China is just one example, but there are other places where it's just not available. Like, for example, vanilla. You don't grow vanilla, or if you do, it's in small pockets of the country.
Right.
So you will always have to import that.
Yeah.
You will always have to import that. There are many things that are not replaceable for just reasons of geography. There are things that are not going to be available in terms of especially natural resources. But in terms of manufactured things, you can't replace them because you don't have manufacturing. And it will be years, if not decades, before you reach that capacity. So you're still going to buy from China. That's not going to stop. All it is doing is, as I say, it's not actually punishing China, because they already know you need our stuff. All it is doing is, on the one hand, it's punishing small importers, making it too costly for them to do it, so that the only people who can do it will be the big companies, and the big companies will get their tariffs paid by taxpayers, most likely. So this is a method of transfer, wealth transfer, again, of taxpayer funds into the private sector to the largest players.
Yeah, skimming off the top.
Yeah, because you're still going to import. You're not going to stop importing.
Sure, because you're not capable, you don't have the capacity nor the capability of...
You don't have a choice. So this is like a controlled demolition of American hegemony. It's a controlled demolition of American economic hegemony in the world. Because you have to do a controlled demolition because it's derelict as it is,
Yeah.
and it's falling apart as it is, and it can't compete as it is. Yeah, it hasn't been a while. It hasn't been able to be really competitive globally for a while, and they have identified correctly that the solution to that issue is not to try to become competitive, because you can't. Because also the nature of the way that you have run your society, the way that you have run your society in service to a very small group of people at the top of the economic financial hierarchy, and because of your political system, which incentivizes you to keep the people as dumb and as unskilled as possible. I'm sorry to be rude, but you have completely sabotaged your society, sabotaged your economy. It could only ever be a short-term success. This model is not sustainable at all. And so now you don't have the ingredients, socially, demographically, educationally, to be economically competitive with a China. So there's no one who is making these decisions. And Trump isn't the one making the decisions. Trump works for the ones who are making the decisions. And no, that's not the Jews. That's the A-National OCGFC, which is a people who don't belong to, non-ideological, don't belong to any nation and feel no loyalty to any nation.
Nothing. Profit is Trump. Profit trumps everything.
Yeah, profit trumps everything. They've made the decision correctly that America does not have the ingredients in their society to ever become competitive. So the only thing to do is the controlled demolition of their status as a global power. And you see, and Trump has been assigned this task. And he's doing it very well. And like I said before, he's a very good salesman in that he's got a lot of people believing that this is going to be great for America.
Right.
Obviously, it's going to be catastrophic for America. But my point is the catastrophe was unavoidable.
Yeah.
You've reached a point where a catastrophe is unavoidable for your society.
Okay.
I mean, because also the other thing is what companies are going to do, even if they get some kind of like tax breaks or subsidies or whatever relief to pay for the tariffs, all you're going to actually do, you'll actually have the opposite effect. If supposedly, I mean, I feel funny to even argue this point because, like I said from the beginning, no one is doing this with the real intention of bringing manufacturing jobs back to America. Because all it will really do is accelerate and intensify the impulse for financialization for companies. Because you will recognize, and this is what they've been doing now for a very long time, and this is one of the reasons why you are not a competitive economy anymore. Real productive activity is going to be too risky and too dangerous and too costly. To actually invest in manufacturing when I don't know what your tariff policies are going to be. I don't know how affordable the supplies are going to be for the things that I need to manufacture. Also, wages are going to be high unless you're able to drive wages down to incentivize bringing manufacturing jobs and so on. The point is, you are going to completely disincentivize anyone from getting involved in productive activity. And they will realize that the only way to make money is through financialization. And it's because of this financialization, one of the reasons, a big reason why your economy is no longer competitive and why it doesn't even have the ingredients to be competitive, is because you focused on financialization.
Yeah.
And you can have someone like Elon Musk making or losing tens of billions of dollars overnight.
Yeah.
Because it's fake money. It's virtual money.
Yeah.
This is virtual wealth. It's through financialization, share prices, and so forth. So they're only going to respond to this the same way that they always respond to these kinds of things, which is through share buybacks and so forth and financialization. No, productive activity is too risky.
will be really, really in the interest of the rest of the world to be cut off from this
Absolutely.
ecosystem.
I mean, Trump was calling this day Liberation Day.
Right.
It's the Global Liberation Day from American hegemony, is what it is. It's not America getting liberated from anything.
No.
It's us getting liberated from America. So it's not a misnomer. It is
Just a
Liberation
moment.
Day.
Let's tally this up.
It's a little bit of a hard pill for people to swallow. If you haven't been following the stages of the transition, if you haven't really been following and understanding it, and you have still an ideological perspective of the world, and you still have a sort of ideological and obsolete paradigm for understanding the world, in my opinion, it's obsolete. This idea of America being the superpower and so forth. If you're attuned to reality, and like the new PM of Singapore made a statement about in reaction to Trump's announcements, and as I was saying, Singapore is not known for hyperbole. They don't have hysterical rhetoric. They're very realistic and pragmatic, and moderate and temperate in their reactions to any world events. They're always very, very calm. And he is affirming that what we are seeing now is the entire global world order is changed. And it's not going back. This is what he said. And he's correct. And you should have seen it coming. I saw it coming, and I've been talking about it. And I know that I'm not the only one. There's plenty of people who can see that. The trick of it is, as I say, looking at the predictable outcome of the policy and assuming that that is the actual desired outcome, and it has nothing to do with the rhetoric. The rhetoric about why this policy is what it is. As long as you're believing that, you'll never understand what's going on.
Yeah.
If you understand that the desired outcome, or that the predictable outcome is the desired outcome, then you'll understand what's going on. You just have to
That's
cut.
all that matters.
Yeah, you just have to cut through the propaganda,
Yeah.
the sales pitch.
Because that keeps the noise and the distraction.
And the confusion,
Yeah.
and you'll be able to prepare better for what's going on. You won't be surprised. I mean, it is absolutely exactly what's happening. It is a global transition of the center of gravity of the global economy. And like I've talked about also many, many times, the same system, neoliberalism, neoliberal capitalism, which manifested itself in the form of colonization, the IMF, financial, monetary colonization, debt colonization, and so on. Everything that you did in the global south is now going to be done to you. Because, again, you have created this faction of people who are not aligned to any country. So they don't see any reason why. Why the logic of pillage and plunder that applied very well and profitably in the global south should not be applied to America and to Europe. That doesn't make sense to them. Because the only way that it makes sense to you is if you're ideological.
Right. Of course. Do you suppose that there would be a disruption in the financialization with the increasing shift to the global south, and so posing a challenge to international OCGFC's existence? Because the way we operate is a little bit different, as in our governments are not likely to be as subject to private businesses. We tend to operate with a mind of our own. So do you think that the financialization aspect of I don't know, could there be more regulation? Would there be a Control-Alt-Delete?
I mean, this really remains to be seen. I think I would hope that our countries can see and understand the horrific flaws in the way the West, especially particularly America, the way they've approached this, and can learn the lessons of how detrimental financialization has been for a national economy. It's extremely beneficial for the people who get rich at the expense of everyone else. I mean, it's absolutely absurd that, I'll talk about this. I'll, I was watching that a South African interview of a South African investigative reporter who was talking about human trafficking, child trafficking, and a case that he had himself investigated and uncovered of a billionaire somewhere in the West. He didn't give the details of a billionaire somewhere in the West who would scroll through TikTok and see children, minors, and call a team of ex-Navy SEALs, ex-Green Berets, ex-Special Forces, or what have you, a private military contractor of some form or another, mercenaries, some form or another, highly skilled, and say, get me this child. And then he has the money to do that. He's a billionaire, and he has the money to do literally whatever he wants. So I'm saying those type of people should not exist in society. You should not have people in your society who can do whatever they want, who have the power, because of their wealth, to do whatever they want.
This concept of an overlord,
Yeah.
In your society, because purely on the basis of immense access to wealth that you possess.
Like I said in a video years ago now, imagine if, or you cannot imagine any scenario in which Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he was the Khalifa, would tolerate a rival to his power who was not the Khalifa because of his wealth. You can't imagine a scenario in which a rich businessman, a rich landowner or something like that within the Muslim empire could create basically a parallel power structure where he could defy the Khalifa. But this is the system that you created to create people like this. Because again you insisted on this phony democracy, which requires you to have elections every couple of moments, historically, every couple of years, every few years. Always changes in the personnel in government, which, as I said before, gives you just a tyranny of incompetence and inexperience, and the politicians have to do nothing but campaign, and then of course they become owned by whoever gives them the money for their campaigns and so on. We all know that. That's old news. But the only solution to that, or the only way to have any sort of planning in your society, is for all planning, all decision making, all policy making to be moved outside the pale of government into the private sector, where they are unelected, and so forth. So you've done so many things about the way you've organized your society in such unrealistic, ideological ways to cover up the basic foundation of greed and feudalism that has always fueled your society and your culture. You came up with all these ways to hide it and so forth. That you created a situation where there was really no check on private power. The expansion of private power and the elevation of private power to the point of surpassing the government. And that then, of course, creates a situation where ultimately, like I said, it has to be a short-term empire, because you can't function as an economy. You can't function as a society when the entire machine of government and the power structure becomes completely in service to the creation of multi-billionaires who exist outside of government, who exist outside of any checks and balances and so forth. This is no way that this can be sustainable. So I really hope that our governments, because our governments are not, with maybe some exceptions here and there, but by and large, the governments in the Muslim world are above business. Business is below them. In China, the government is above business. Business is below them. In Russia, same. And in many, many countries, it's like this. The countries that they accuse of being authoritarian, totalitarian, or what have you. Meaning, the government is the totalitarian one, and the authoritarian one, when the one that we like is when business is the authoritarian one, and the government is democratic, which largely is what allows for the business to be authoritarian. But in our countries, we prefer the government to be that way. We prefer the power to be in the hands of the government than in the hands of business. And you criticize us for that, but that's fine. So I hope that our countries, our governments, won't make the same mistakes that they made. And I know that the A National OCGFC are contending with, like an MBS. They're contending with Bin Zayed. They're contending with Erdogan. They're contending with Xi Jinping. They're contending with Putin. They're even contending in South Africa, even though it's not, a strongman government, as they would call it. Because they, as I've said for years now, there's not a question about the transition happening. There's a question about the management of the way that the economy will be run after the transition. So part of that also includes trying to manage the transition, trying to get ahead of it, trying to steer it, trying to direct it to see that it goes a certain kind of way. That's what they're interested in. No one is trying to stop the transition. As we can see, they are accelerating the transition with Trump. The question is whether or not our countries are going to be savvy enough, cunning enough, strong enough, courageous enough, and incorruptible enough to not make the same mistakes that the Americans made with regards to governance and keeping private power in check.
Right, in absorbing their economic systems into ours. Because to a certain extent, I think a lot of authoritarian governments navigated restrictions against them through utilizing these mechanisms.
Mm-hmm.
They navigated and emerged to have a will of their own through utilizing this. And now they're emerging as the leading economies, and they have to contend with these international actors.
Yeah. And they're doing it through partnerships rather than through some sort of confrontation.
Right.
They don't want to be adversary with that.
And having a say.
Yeah.
In the decisions on the board.
Which in my opinion is very wise, but it's also very dangerous.
Yes, of course.
It's very dangerous and it can go badly. So we hope Allah will guide them and make them strong in dealing with these people, because we know very well, and they know very well, this is the other thing that gives me some more optimism, because you know who you're dealing with. I don't think they have any illusions in their mind about the fact that they are dealing with wolves. They're dealing with predators. Because also, you know that you're dealing with people who sold their own people out. You're dealing with people who sold their own countries out, who sold their own nations out, who sold their own societies out. So you know these people are heartless. You know from the beginning these people are heartless. So I don't think that they will have any illusions that we're friends. They know that we have to deal with you, and by dealing with you, we can limit. We're in a position to restrict and to limit and to control better than if we were on the outside and you were on the outside. You know, if we're on the same side, then we can coordinate a bit better. This is in theory, and so far so good. So far so good. I hope that they will put some kind of limits on financialization. I'm not too optimistic about that. I hope that they will, but I'm not too optimistic. I'm afraid that the financialization gravy train is too seductive, because it's such easy money. And I haven't seen any restrictions or any limits or any hesitation about financialization on the part of the leaders in the Global South. And that's something I wish that they would wake up to, because it's extremely dangerous for your own society.
that's not good.
So global markets are crashing today.
Even in Korea, we call it Black Monday.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they're going to be calling that the same in USA, Black Monday. I wouldn't be shocked. We already had a couple big days down, Thursday, Friday, and then over the weekend, essentially the Trump people are trying to defend, this whole tariff thing. But
How can you defend whole world is melting right now?
so the way that they defend it is they basically just lie.
Pain in the market. At some point, you're unwilling to tolerate this idea of a Trump put. Is there a threshold?
I think your question is so stupid. I mean, I think it's I don't want anything to go down, but sometimes you have to take medicine to fix something. And we have such a horrible, we have been treated so badly by other countries.
When there's a crash, I hope it's going to be during this next 12 months, because I don't want to be Herbert Hoover. The one president, I just don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
Are any questions?
How was the golf tournament?
Very good, because I won. It's good to win. You heard I won, right? Did you hear I won? Just to back it up over there, I won.
What's your handicap
I like
these
to win
days?
very low. I have a very low handicap.
So it's just basically their defense. They just lie and just make stuff up. Now we're blaming it on shrimp in Vietnam.
But we have to change course. We cannot continue to do the same thing. It's like playing football. If you keep running the ball up the middle and you're not getting any traction, you got to start throwing the ball. That's what President Trump's doing. He's a businessman. He's the first president that's really stood up and say enough of other countries ripping us off. Just in my state of Alabama, catfish farmers are going under because Vietnam is dumping billions of trash catfish and shrimp into our state.
Yeah.
Blame the shrimp Vietnam.
Well, if your supporters, I guess, all want to work in the shrimping industry, like Bubba Gump, in the movie Forrest Gump, I guess everyone in America is going to become shrimp farmers now. Or do we call it farmer or shrimp fisherman, I guess? What's that?
Do you even have a shrimp farming in USA?
Yeah, so that's the discussion would be basically Trump wants to roll everything back because he keeps promising people jobs, right? So if we're blaming Vietnamese shrimpers, then does that mean we want to be now American shrimpers and that's our future? Like that's been their discussion, and people are making jokes of if your argument now is like they were talking about catfish and shrimp, it's not a very good argument.
You can't even argue with that.
Catfish and shrimp. Our problem, guys, is catfish and shrimp. But the other joke was, well, at least we're not eating the cats and dogs. And other people were like, well, you could go eat a Tesla. We had the big protests over the weekend, and essentially people are mad.
Should be. You gotta do something.
Well, the sort of the title of the protest was called "Hands Off." So people are like, hands off our money, hands off Social Security. All these things. Was that?
Hands off the president.
Who's hands off the president?
Trump. Hands off.
Oh, hands off.
Kid.
Okay, so this is a couple scenarios that people have been asking me about. We had a situation in Korea where the Korean President Yoon tried to do a martial law, right? So basically, Yoon wanted to do martial law because people weren't following his orders, essentially, right?
So we impeach him.
Right. And then actually arrested the guy, and then the final decision was just announced, and he's going to go through criminal trials. I mentioned this because there's kind of the rumor. If you want to go down the rumor mill, would be Trump gets so mad that the whole country starts, protesting against him, and then he tries to do some sort of martial law kind of thing. I wouldn't be shocked at this point if that's sort of where we're going.
But
because what's that?
if this happened, the generals, they saw the Korea case.
Oh, should be.
Follow.
Yeah, so this is for anyone in the USA. If you're working with Trump people, do not follow an illegal order, right? Follow your conscience and the morals and serve the American people. What's that?
Yeah, at the moment, if you don't follow Trump's order, he's firing you. But, it's gonna go.
And that's referring to the lawyer that doesn't want to do all the deportations or legal ones that Trump wants to do. But it's not just regular people that are fighting back against Trump with the mass protests. A lot of business leaders are now calling out Trump.
Well, first of all, of course, measure is the wrong word because that suggests some quantification, which is impossible. There's nothing to measure. But how do you gauge? How do you think about the changes? And, you know, this is the biggest change in the environment that I've seen probably in my career. You know, we've gone from free trade or world trade and globalization to this system which implies significant restrictions on trade in every direction and a step toward isolation for the United States. I believe that the last 80 years since World War II have been the best economic period in the history of mankind. And one of the major reasons was the growth of trade.
Basically, they're like, why are we doing this? Can you like stop? You know, please, like that kind of stuff.
There's no reason actually, right? Just only for Trump.
Yeah, I mean that's because if people are curious, like what's Trump's end game? I mean, his real end game is just put more money in his pocket, right?
And you know, build more golf courses and resorts.
Yeah, so his idea is like, I'll have, from Trump's point of view, is I'll have all these countries come and negotiate, and I'll say, okay, if I can build a golf course in your country, then, or build a hotel, then okay, no tariffs for you. Like that's what he's trying to do. Or he's trying to do some sort of grift, where like, hey, if you come, you know, give us so much money, build a factory, whatever, you know, give me 10%, some stupid thing. The interesting thing about this, though, is that which country, I guess there's 50 on the phone at the White House. They're all calling to try to make some, you know, whatever tariff deal, whatever they're going to make. Which country do you think he talks to first?
Israel.
Yeah. That was reported by the Wall Street Journal today. Israel's the first country that they're going to be talking to. So there's that. They actually also took questions, it was on ABC, of like, why aren't we putting tariffs on Russia, right? And they just dodged, basically. Their answer was, oh, we're in negotiations of a war, and so, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like it was a weekend because they don't, yeah.
Excuse.
And then you're probably curious, what is Elon doing today? What's he doing?
He's playing games. There's babies crying.
Yeah.
He doesn't care. He just keeps clicking.
So if you're curious what life is like as supposed, you know, richest guy and supposed smartest guy in the world, he's literally playing video games while people are crying.
Adventuring. Honey cookie. I get it with the magic
But you can play game, but he has 14 kids.
14 kids.
He has multiple economies. And he has a lot of stress that, you know, the whole of the White House is saying that, you know, even the news, must leave in like 2 months, right?
Well, that's okay. So some people have asked about this situation. Okay, so in Musk's position as a special government employee, I think you're only supposed to have a secret line. What's that? You see how special is it, right? Who knows what he is? But he's supposed to have a 130-day limit, supposed to something like that. But they can extend it whatever they want to do. So
no one wants him to.
Well, so that's where the interesting debate is like, okay,
no, Aslan,
Tesla
go away.
Goes down.
Stop.
Elon has no more wealth. Okay, so if you really want to hurt Elon, hurt the stock, because people say like, well, no one wants him, but if he's got wealth, it's kind of an influence thing. They don't like him, but you know, he's still got money to throw around. But if he's got no money to throw around and people don't like him, there's no way. And then maybe the strategy for Trump then after that was to blame it all on Elon. It's all Elon's fault. Now that we got Elon in the White House, you know, then we're going to be winning. They were actually tweeting out that America's winning today.
What?
Yeah, the White House was like, we're all winning, guys. So, yeah, exactly, right? And then I think Trump supposedly. What was that?
Elon won the game.
Oh yeah, it could be. Elon's really good at video games. He's winning, and then I guess Trump theoretically is winning at golf. Although this is a true story. I can't remember which one it was. You guys can remind me who it was, but there were politicians coming out saying like, when we played golf with Trump, that Trump would cheat at golf. So seriously, because you can like lie in your scorecard.
And change your balls.
Yeah, you do whatever he's up to. The same way that Elon cheats at games. That's what these people are. Elon cheats at games by paying people to play games for him.
They don't care even their family.
Yeah. And then now we have to deal with penguin memes. That's been the recent thing. What's going on with the penguin memes?
Trump needs to negotiate tariffs with penguins.
Yeah, negotiate the tariff for the penguin.
And penguins were burning Tesla.
Yeah. So you gotta watch out for those penguins. The penguins are also plotting to poop on the Tesla. So, if you guys don't know, the joke is when the terrorists first came out, and I pointed to you guys, there was like all these different like islands listed on the list. And there was one, it was the McDonald's Island thing. And there's no one lives there except for penguins.
Yeah, and penguin teaches seagull that
Yeah.
it's going to happen to you next time.
Better watch out. And then there was even a meme going down where like the penguins are diving. It's like the American stock market's diving. We make jokes on this stuff, but I do understand this is real people's lives on the line. And I think they're really after your Social Security. I mean, we've known this for a while, and they just keep emphasizing like how they're going to do it. The most recent thing is like they're going to want to cut paper checks for all government things. So like maybe buy like your tax refunds or your Social Security, these kind of things. And so the question would be just, for example, we were talking about this. Do you think your grandma could handle going on?
Is there any discussion of like Sheldon Whitehouse, I think, introduced a housing bill just last year to fund via the low-income housing tax credit, expanding that. There's not really, doesn't seem to be a focus on that. Or last year, there was legislation in the House and then in the Senate that would bar hedge funds from buying up a bunch of homes, which has also driving up the cost of housing. Like, it seems to me that there's a lot of free market solutions and very little taking on of the corporate interest in the commodification of housing. And like, it just feels extremely out of date. Like, it feels like this conversation could have been had, as Sam was saying earlier, in the 90s, where, I'm sorry, at minimum, we need a Keynesian economic model, if not a broad decommodification of housing. And I think almost the entire Democratic Party is there. So the question is, what is this book about, if not just to reify, frankly, the focus on suburban, disaffected Republicans that has killed Democrats in this last election cycle?
Yeah, when you bring up with these folks the issue of hedge funds purchasing housing in middle and lower middle class neighborhoods and turning it into rental units, and then companies being charged with it, in some cases successfully prosecuted on price fixing, they're going to say that's an excuse, that's something you want to talk about because you don't want to talk about the importance of building new housing and market solutions. So they kind of deflect. The other thing that they absolutely don't talk about until you push them, and then they have a different, is one of the big problems with housing costs today is the shrinkage in the number of home builders. It's, since the financial collapse, the number of home builders in any particular metro area has shrunk remarkably. And there's data that show that the fewer competing home builders, the fewer units, the higher the price. And they'll come back with arguments that, well, the big ones can handle the zoning, the little ones can't. Maybe true, maybe not. But they really they don't really believe in. They don't disbelieve in the low-income housing credit, but that's not where they think the problem is, and that's not where they want to put the emphasis.
Let's take one more topic, because we've sort of vaguely, but you really sort of like section by section, go through infrastructure. We saw this, you talk about the high-speed rail in California that ostensibly was, environmentally reviewed to death. It seems to me we always have the same problem that is sort of like there's this poltergeist in all of these things. Like, who is environmentally, the implication as if it's like, it's just the people who love the spotted owls. They're stopping this high-speed train, et cetera, as opposed to, and I think they would argue, well, this is what's problematic with regulations, being weaponized by wealthy interests, whether it's the Koch brothers who don't want, the purple line in where is it?
In Maryland, yeah.
In Maryland, they don't want the purple line. They don't want broad-based public transport from an ideological perspective. Their idea is one that is so libertarian in its structure that it's almost shocking to me, because I would have these arguments back in the tens where it was like, you have corporations who are corrupting our government, and the solution from libertarians is you need to shrink government so that it doesn't have the ability to impact these areas. That way corporations will come in and corrupt it. It's like, well, wait a second. Yeah, well, of course, and it's sort of like you're basically saying shoot the cancer victim as a way of killing the cancer. And that doesn't make sense. You need to shrink the cancer with maintaining the health of the host. And so, again, it's like a almost a pathological desire to hide the ball in terms of like what are regulations set up to do? Where is this friction happening? There's surely times where it's like, this regulation is stupid, but more often than not, it is the exploitation of people who have so much money that for them, at the end of the day, it just becomes like a balancing test as to where to, extend their resources. Let's talk about healthcare, because I thought this was also sort of like an interesting sort of avoidance of what is the most obvious way to constrain and provide healthcare benefits to as many people as possible. But talk about their ideas when it comes to healthcare.
So, you're right that they have this sort of libertarian attitude that it's constraint imposed by government regulation that is the root cause of our inability to have nice things. In healthcare, their argument is the doctors' lobby constricts the number of physicians and the number of residential posts that are funded by the government in order to keep their incomes up, which is true. They do that. And so it follows, they say, that if we increase the number of doctors in various ways, that will lower healthcare costs. And if we lived if healthcare were a proper functioning market economy, there might be some truth to that, but we don't, right? The healthcare markets are not, as the textbooks describe, for a whole lot of reasons, but most recently because the providers of healthcare, the hospitals, have become monopolies. In 75% of metro areas, a local hospital has 50% or more of the beds. And the hospitals don't just control the beds, they own the doctor's practices. They own the blood labs. In many cases, they own the insurance companies. So they're imposing prices, right? You can add all the doctors you want, and it's going to have no real effect on bringing down the cost of healthcare. And for reasons I don't understand, because I know these folks, they've written for my magazine, I've known them for years, they're very reluctant to talk about concentration of industry the way I just did. And they're just much more comfortable, with these imaginary tweaks that they can make, to supply and market and regulation. And it's frustrating.
It's interesting because the healthcare dynamic is very it is odd. Like you write about, hammer, when everything's when you have a hammer, everything's a nail. And I still remember this piece by Atul Gawande, which must have been now 15 years ago, where he compared Medicare reimbursement rates in 2 different towns in Texas, and found that, doctors who own their own MRIs, for instance, they use the MRI a lot more than maybe other doctors did who didn't have it, because you have it there, you use it, you got a loan on it, you're paying it off, and so you're going to use it as much as you can. You're going to bill your clients that way, and without a sort of the cost constraints of the reimbursements.
Yeah.
So that naturally we can assess, in this instance, the MRI was not warranted. They're just using it because they have the machine.
Yeah.
It's the opposite on some level when you talk about this consolidation, because we could let in a lot of doctors from, from India, from around the world, who are trained doctors, just as competent as any doctor coming out of a U.S. School. And we could have a lot more doctors in here without having the capital that could come from a government, essentially, whose interest is to provide health care as opposed to make profit. They would have no ability to set up a practice or have an ability to serve, maybe like very basic general practitioner
Can
stuff.
I have
But
some? Spread the luck around.
we need to have an investment and a protection within the system where profit is not the primary motive of owning a hospital.
High on a hill was a lonely goat herd.
That was apropos, but it wasn't on purpose. But there's a complete. It's as if that concept is completely not even on the table for them.
Yeah, you bring in more doctors, you get more knee surgeries, you raise costs, you don't lower costs. I mean, not always, but that's kind of the tendency of healthcare. As you say,
But that's a function of our inability to have a cohesive system. It's just because it's a profit motive
This
business.
is why the Washington Monthly has been proposing for a number of years a healthcare reform called Medicare Prices for All. It's not Medicare for all. It's not an expansion of healthcare. It's a government imposition of prices, because we no longer have a market that sets prices. We have monopoly institutions that give us prices with no ability to push back. And if you work, if you're in the workforce, you 99% chance you get or 95% chance you get your health care from your employer, right? You're paying double, triple what somebody on Medicare is paying. And doctors who take Medicare, they make plenty of money. There's hospitals that take Medicare, they make money. But those who are on commercial care, they make tons of money. That's why every hospital's building multiple wings. If the government says from now on every knee surgery, same price. Every doctor visit to your primary care, same price. You get the Medicare price. The end result of that is thousands of dollars in the pocket of the average family, because so much of what would have been their wage increases has been going to pay for their health care coverage, and then being siphoned off into this, giant consolidated developer, hospital industrial complex. Now, if you're talking to a Democratic donor about things like that, they're gonna be horrified, especially if they're doctors. But for the average person, that's going to give them direct benefit much quicker than and with more certainty than anything that the abundance liberals are talking about.
And it also seems to me that when you impose, in this instance, you're basically talking about cost controls, it's basically price fixing based upon a lot of data as to what these things should cost. What it also does, in my mind, which it gives it durability, is it begins to decrease the concentration of wealth on the supply side, and therefore diminishes the political power of these people to further extract from our government and our public kitty, as it were. I mean, personally, I also can't stand the paperwork. And so, like, the fact that we're getting a slightly, it's costing me less is great. But I also don't want to have to work for this. I don't want to have a second job as filling out and making sure that I'm getting my reimbursements or, keep up with the latest, like, are people in network or out of network? I just want everybody to be in network. But I guess, as an interim step, I mean, for me, one of the biggest features of antitrust is that it begins to decrease wealth concentration and political power concentration. And then it opens up the opportunity to do things in a much more efficient way, it seems to me.
Let's see what's inside.
The thing about the abundance liberal folks is I think all of their books went to press before Donald Trump was inaugurated.
100%.
Yes.
100%.
And now they come out with what really has been a years-long kind of campaign to raise the salience, and they're very open about it, And again, these are friends of mine. They want abundance liberalism to be if not the defining faction of the Democratic Party, and they're doing it at a time when the oligarchs have taken control of the federal government and destroying the agencies which they claim to want to fix.
Right.
It's
We're
really
about to find out if it's helpful to have no regulation. In the USDA and the FDA and whatnot. I mean, there's either an ideology that we can leave this up to corporate America, or there's one in which we need to have, government constraining corporate power and corporate accumulation of wealth.
And can I just say, it's not just antitrust. Antitrust is an important tool. But when you look at what's keeping us from building
my plan for the day?
the electric transmission
Doing whatever I feel
infrastructure
like, I
that can
suppose.
bring
Same with
us
tomorrow,
a clean
and
energy
the day
future.
after that.
The abundance liberals people point to federal environmental statutes that have been weaponized to stop these things. And they're not wrong. This is one of those occasions where, we need to have some reform of federal statutes. But the biggest constraint is investor-owned electric utility monopolies. They make their money, right, burning fossil fuels and getting a percentage. Solar doesn't cost anything once you build it. It has high upfront costs, but virtually zero fuel costs. And so they're under the model we have
Swallows
now
nest when
for
skies are
private
fair,
electric utilities.
but hide
They
when
see
storms
solar
are in the
as a
air.
threat to their business model. So, antitrust isn't the right tool for that. You know what the right tool is? Create a Tennessee Valley Authority.
Yep.
Nationalize in some form or another. Yes.
Yes. What did FDR do to force the electric companies to wire the poor parts of the country? He created a government agency that said, we're going to do it if you don't. We'll steal your business.
Right.
That got their attention. FDR called it the birch rod in the cupboard. You pull it out and you threaten. And we need to create new agencies to go after this corporate power. And, to me, that is just a practical step that most Americans could understand.
And I guess maybe it's a good place for us to wrap here. Just the political implications of this, Paul, if you have a sense, because it's hard to discern. Is this just a book tour, and a poorly timed one? But when I see Josh Shapiro tweeting out, "I'm doing the abundance agenda," I am concerned about the Democratic Party going in this direction once again, when we could be drawing a very explicit contrast with Donald Trump right now and advocating for government. This is largely it's not anti-government, but it's a critique of government regulations, and I just can't think of a time when it would be worse to make that argument and have the party embrace parts of that argument.
It is a hard question, and I don't have a crystal ball. If you look at Ezra Klein himself did an interview with a pollster named Daniel Shore, who tested all of Kamala Harris's ads. And the ad that moved voters the most was the one that said, we're going to go after the landlords for high prices.
Yep.
And we're going to go after the price gougers for high grocery prices. Right? That's what voters care about. And the abundance liberals are, you know, they're tapping into that energy on the housing front. But are their means going to be ones that average voters care about? You know, it seems to me no, and that average voters are much more likely to understand that large corporations jack up prices because they can, because they have power, and they have power in the government, and they're corrupting everything. That's an easier sell to me, not a politician, than saying we're going to come after your zoning and put buildings there you moved when you moved in weren't there. So we'll see, but I will tell you this is hot in the donor class among
I know
those Democrats who don't want to confront corporate power. This is a built-in way to be for something that voters want without